Hey everybody, how's it going? Another cornucopia of horror video for you today. Another novel this time, and this is number 6 or 7. I don't really know. You'll know when you read the title. But this is a book called Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Cesare, and I actually have the cover for you today. Although I don't know how well that's going to come across on camera because it's on my Kindle, but a pretty cool cover. Okay, this book was marketed heavily marketed. If you have anything to do with the horror community or the booktube or authortube, or you watch any of that kind of content or follow anyone on social media relating to that, then chances are that the algorithm got you and showed you an ad for this book, because it wouldn't stop showing me an ad for this book. I don't even watch that much like book content on YouTube. I do, but it's a very, you know how I am. It's a select group of small YouTubers. So I found it weird that I was getting marketing for this like out the wazoo. But I thought, what the hell? I'm gonna check it out. The ebook of this was $1, I think. So it was really cheap. You know how it goes. Ebooks $1, paperbacks like $57. The hardcover is like you have to take out a small loan of $1 million. Anyways, though, so I looked at a couple reviews for this before I read it, and I didn't want to spoil anything, but a couple of my friends on Goodreads had reviewed it and things, and the general consensus of this book was split one or two ways. I actually didn't see a lot of negative reviews, which is kind of strange. Like, okay, it's weird. These are either like paid ads or paid reviews, or this book just happens to be really good. Um, and the consensus seems to be either this book's fucking awesome, this is a great slasher movie style novel, or it wasn't that good, but it was still fun. Those are basically the two things I got. So I read it. Let me give you a non spoiler review real quick. Uh, I recommend this book with a caveat. This is listed as a young adult novel. And I saw a lot of talk about this like tag. A lot of people kind of almost arguing about it to a degree. I've either seen people saying, yes, it read like a young adult novel, or a lot of people actually saying, it's not really a young adult novel, it's a slasher movie, it's very violent, there's profanity, it's R rated, it's not really for young adults or teenagers. I think that they just put the tag in there because it's about teenagers, and or it was some sort of marketing thing because young adult books sell very well right now. Okay. Well, I read it. And like I said, it is definitely a young adult novel. In fact, I think it won like the Bram Stoker Award for young adult fiction or something. It's clearly a young adult novel, okay? It reads like that. I don't know if it was marketed like that. Maybe it was, but it definitely feels like a book for maybe not necessarily teenagers, but maybe teenagers, but young adults. And I mean, there's violence in this, there's profanity, but it's like if this was a movie, it'd be an R-rated movie. But like kids watch all that. Kids swear. Kids watch R-rated films. This is not very extreme. This is not like Jack Ketchum. Okay, this I could see a teenager. This is something I would have read in high school or middle school, maybe. But so yeah, it is an easy read. It does play out just like a slasher movie. So the story is pretty fun. It's very, very, very easy to read. There's nothing crazy in here. This is a very pulpy book. I recommend it if you're younger. I don't really think I have a lot of younger folks watching me, but if you're younger, I think you might find this interesting. Not because like your reading abilities are worse than mine, but there's like just so many young adult references in here, like hello fellow kids kind of references. We'll talk about that, but I think it would maybe be more suitable for you. Or, and I don't mean this in a rude way, but if you're someone who does not read, um, but you like horror movies and you like slashers and you want to get into reading, I think this would be a good pick for you. And I don't mean that because like you're dumb and you can't read well. You don't read very very good, but because you might forgive some of the some of the issues in this book. You might find that the simplified sort of storytelling is fine for you, someone who doesn't have a lot of experience for a novel, and it's very simple to digest, and it'd just be a good way to get you into reading. Then you can move on to other authors that write in a similar vein of this. So that's that. It's for what it is. It's fine. I do think it's intended for younger kids, like teenagers and young adults, and for that it's okay. And it's hard to be super critical when I really honestly believe that that's what the target audience is. Like this book is clearly not for an adult, but that's that. Let's get into the spoiler review where I'm going to kind of tear this book apart. And I don't mean that gleefully. I'm going to tell you how I really felt about it. Okay, so happy birthday. This one's for Rick. Happy birthday. Okay, so what's this book about? It's about this chick named Quinn Maybrook, I think. And I'm going to spoil. This is all spoilers, by the way. We just did the non-spoil section. Her and her dad, Glenn, who is a doctor, move into a new sleepy town. Her mother died. They're trying to start over. Move into a sleepy town. And the setup of this, it's very, you've seen this a million times. Like I said, this plays like a slasher novel, a slasher movie. You've seen this a bajillion times, especially if you watch slasher movies. And they move into a new town. The adults, everyone's kind of weird. The kids are kind of usual teenage kids. And she very quickly becomes friends with these popular kids at the school. And the mascot of the town is this clown named Friendo the Clown, who is on the side of this big old factory that made corn syrup. That has basically long since been burned down. There's some, you kind of learn about it. And she can see that through her bedroom window. Like she can always see the clown mural, basically. And then it goes on from there to what do you think's going to happen? Just people start getting picked off. People start getting killed by the clown. Yeah, it's exactly what you thought would happen. And so this book, it takes a long time. It's a 352-page novel, so it's not super long. It takes a very long time to get to the action. This book is very simple. The author's prose, his voice, like the way he tells the story, is very, very simple. It's very simple, and it's very, I guess you could say accessible, but it's boring to read at times. Like, it's so generic the way he tells the story that it feels amateurish at times. Now, that might be because I haven't read any of his other stuff, so I don't know if he writes adult-oriented novels. Subject matter and maturity of the text are two different things. And again, like, it's not a bad thing to like this kind of stuff. I read this kind of shit all the time. I was actually saying in my Goodreads review that when I read these, like, literature-style books, like, mostly horror is what I read, but drama or, like, heavy-duty horror literature or postmodernism kind of stuff, that stuff is really heavy. And I'm not trying to showboat or anything, but, like, that shit gets to you after a while. I can't read more than 2 or 3 of those kind of books in a row before I need a break. And I need a palate cleanser, and stuff like this is what I normally read. But this is so, like, I would read Richard Lehman or Jack Ketchum. Those are my 2 go-to, like, palate cleanser authors. And that's not a slight against them as an author. They just write pulpy, easy-to-digest books. But their writing is great. I mean, and as a matter of fact, some of what Jack Ketchum has written is like phenomenal. Layman as well, and there's some other good authors in that vein, but I think you know what I mean. So this just doesn't have that kind of weight. Like, it's even too simple for me, and at times it honestly, and this isn't a slight to these authors, but it reads like an Amazon, like, Kindle Unlimited self-published book, if that makes sense. If you read a lot of ebooks, you've probably read some of that stuff. $2 ebooks, essentially written, some, don't get me wrong, some great books in there. I've found some great authors that you would never find in the bookstore. But a lot of people on there are just folks like me who just wanted to write a book, and they can. and it's often not very good. So it kind of is like almost a step above that sometimes. I was reading it a couple times and I thought, this is awkward. There's some awkward writing. Like, this was published by a major house. I can't remember who published it, but obviously he had some editors on hand and stuff like that. But there's just some awkward writing that is baked into his style, I feel. And I just wonder if his other books, talking about content versus maturity, I feel like if I were to read his other books, maybe the content would be more disturbing, but I have a feeling his writing style would be as simple. And that's just an assumption, though. You know, I would be interested in checking out his more mature stuff to see if his writing style is different. You know, maybe he did write this very simply for this young audience. So, like I said, the book takes quite a while to get into the action, and certain books do this. Like Jack Ketchum is pretty well known for this, like especially in his like off-season kind of trilogy, the Dead River trilogy. Great book. It's okay. So we'll get to it at the end. I'm getting ahead of myself, but he takes a long time to get to the action, and he does it on purpose. It's a slow build, and when the action comes, it's nuts and it doesn't stop. It's great. It's a great release. It's a great way to write the book. But I feel like in like a book like Off Season, it's like 50, 60 pages in, maybe 70. That's pushing it though. And then we start getting crazy. This book is like 180 pages. There's a couple there's like two kills that are like really brief. Kind of, it reminded me of like Scream, like the killer finding you in your house and like toying with you. It read like Scream, like the first like major kill, but you don't really get much. And then literally not until like 180 pages into the book do you start getting into the actual action. And then that's basically it. You basically have the setup, which is like it's just too long. Having your I get the author's trying to plant the seeds of the plot, but it could have been much faster. It felt meandering, like a lot of uh, kids in the school, like just the before stuff, the calm before the storm. It was just too much of it. 180 pages is way too long to get into this kind of shit. It's way too long. So that was a big problem I had, that I'm like, this book isn't that long, and I know it's not going to be like some big weighty book. So we don't need all this sort of exposition and character building for a book where most of the characters are going to get killed off, and none of the characters are really that deep, even the main character. So that was an annoyance. We finally get to the big kill section, which is really what this book is, just a build up and then a whole like action sequence, and then the book's done. And it started interesting. Like it started and it felt like a good slasher, like nothing I haven't seen before, but a fun slasher. They go to this party. They have this thing called Founders Day, where it's like a celebration of the town, and all the adults in the town are like really big on it, and the kids want to do their own Founders Day. There's like you just see these little scenes of like how the adults just hate the kids, and gives you almost like a weird Children of the Corn vibe going on there. And when the shit hits the fan, the kids throw their own Founders Day party out in the woods at night. And of course, Friendo the Clown shows up and starts fucking killing everybody with crossbows. And it's clearly like a dude in a costume. So it's not a supernatural thing, at least the way that it's written. It makes you think like it's a guy, it's a Scream situation here, which I kind of dug. And for a moment in this section of the book, I almost thought for a brief flash that this book was going to change and do something like crazy. And I almost had a small moment where I'm like, oh, I think this is about to get really good. And it didn't. So that was really disappointing. And I'll tell you what happened. There's this subtext. There's a lot of subtext in this book. And I wouldn't really call it subtext. I'd call it hit yourself over the head with a sledgehammer. It's like there are a lot of themes in this book, and they're not subtle. They're on full display, and they're awkward to read. And I think that was intentional, hopefully, because it's a young adult book. So he was trying to get kids thinking about these themes, and he didn't want them to miss them. But like I don't know. I should give kids more credit. Like who's this? I don't know who this book is for. Honestly, I've said this a lot. Like, yeah, like it's very odd. Like I know kids watch and read this kind of shit, but it's like the theming is so simplified, and I don't know, maybe kids are stupid today, but then like there's a lot of gore and stuff. I don't know. But this one dude shows up that she knows, this guy named Rusty or Rustin or something like that, Russ, and he has like guns with him at the party. He's like a hunter, and she meets him earlier in the book, and she has this thought like she doesn't say it, but she's like, oh, I think this kid's like a school shooter or something because he seems like a lone wolf. And he's got a fuckload of guns that he brought to a party. So I thought for a minute that this was going to turn into like a school shooter kind of story and start talking about that and like flip the genre on its head. And I thought this might be some good shit. And as the chaos starts, it still feels like a slasher, but like you get the sense that maybe this is like a school shooting kind of situation with this like a kid like fucking killing all of his classmates, and he kind of like works that in there, and then it's not. And then the big reveal is that it's the fucking town. It's all the adults, and there's a bunch of friendos that start showing up, and they're all dressed up as this clown, and they're just murdering the kids, and it's like, what? And then the sheriff, who is like Scooby Doo villain, shows up, takes one of the kid, and you find out that her friend Cole, who she's friends with Cole and Russ. All the other characters blend together. Really, I mean they do. Like you're gonna be confused about who's who. And I'm sorry that this is going on for so long, but I just had to get my thoughts out there. This douchebag sheriff shows back up, takes the kid, and takes the kid in the back of the car, and then you learn that some of the kids were in on it too, and I was like, wait, what? And I don't know if I fully understood that, like what was going on there. But this is like all the adults in the town. Then the Sheriff Dunn, takes Cole in the back of his car and drives him off to the factory where he's gonna meet his maker, and he just exposition dumps, and I'm like, this is unacceptable writing, man. Like, I'm sorry I'm being so harsh. Like, I watch Adam Caesar's YouTube channel. He's a cool dude. I like his videos, and I am going to read some of his other books. But this is poor writing. This isn't even acceptable for a kid's novel. Like, this exposition dump. I'm going to tell you my whole plan. You see, and it's like, and then he just tells the whole plan. I'm like, there's such better ways to do this, man. There's like, this is poor writing. And if I saw this even in a slasher movie, I'd be pissed. I can't stand that shit. It's like, okay, well, just tell us everything. Like, now you don't. It's like a Deus Ex Machina in a way, where you can do whatever you want because you don't have to really have any action or plot development that explains this whole section because it's just told to a character in a fucking car ride. Then he gets to the warehouse and his dad is there, and his dad's going to have him killed because he burned down his factory and his daughter died. I was kind of done with the book at this point. And then of course like Quinn shows up to save the fucking day, and then Russ, who you think is dead because he blew up a fucking barn with dynamite, shows up out of, like, he to save the day, and they get into a big gunfight. And so it's interesting, like, parts of this book do feel like a slasher, but it's like it always feels like one of the worst slashers, not like the worst, but like one of the poorer slashers I've seen, like really cheap early 2000s stuff, which is stuff that you're maybe gonna not finish. And there's so much gunfighting in this, it feels like an action movie sometimes. And like there's this weird subtext about like the school shooting thing, and then it's like then it morphs into this like discussion on guns, and it's very odd because there's so many conflicting sort of messages in this book. I don't know what his point was, or if he was just doing it to do it. Like, he kind of like brings up this whole, it's like Quinn doesn't want to use the gun, and Russ is like, you have to use these fucking guns, these people are cutting people's heads off, we need to be shooting them. And she's like, oh, but I don't want to use a gun, we need to call the cops. And he's like, the cops aren't going to help us, it's gun time, let's go. And it kind of reads like, almost like, see, like sometimes guns are good, and like I'm fine with guns, like I don't think you should be like fucking owning machine guns and shit, but like I don't have a problem with the concept of like using a gun to defend yourself against like basically a infanticide or whatever you want to call it, like killing all these kids off, right? Like that's a situation where of course the using fucking rifles is like anybody would do that. But it's like the author was trying to say, like, see, sometimes guns are good. It's like, even though I agree with him, it's like, it's very heavy-handed. But then there's also like this anti-conservative viewpoint in this book that's very heavy-handed. And like, I'm not a conservative, so it's not like I was bothered by this message. But again, it was so heavy-handed. The whole theming of the book was like, stupid conservatives who like don't understand kids and think that we need things to be the traditional way, and then they basically kill all these kids because they feel like they're ruining their town with their damn cell phones. And it just has a very much like, and then it's like, we're going to make progress because just because, it just has that, it's very heavy-handed in its messaging with like, see how conservatives have this stupid mindset where they think like kids are stupid because they're different and they want everything to be like tradition, but they don't make progress. And like it's very heavy-handed. So I'm like, which viewpoint are you going for here? It was very conflicting, and it was just on the nose and in my face, and it was hard to read. And that's all I have to say about the book. um, the ending, it just felt like Scooby-Doo. It felt like a kid's book at times, and it wasn't that great. Like I gave it a 2 on Goodreads out of 5. I would probably give it a 2.5 because there were some fun slasher moments in the book. Like I said in the beginning, I do recommend it. Like I don't know if I would recommend it if any of my viewers like don't like that kind of shit, then stay away because you're not going to like it. But if you want a fun little slasher, the palate cleanser you can read in maybe 1 or 2 sittings, then give it a shot. But the ending was bad and the beginning was bad. It was like the middle where all the action was mostly fine, and it was everything else, aka the book, was poor. I mean, really lazy writing. So I'm sorry to be so harsh again, but that's how I felt. That being said, like I mentioned, I am gonna check his other books out. There is a sequel to this, but I don't think I want to read it just because now that I know that this is really like too simple for me. Not to sound like conceited, but it is too simple, too much for kids for me. I'm not interested in the other sequel, Friendo Lives. I am interested in checking his other books out though. So that's that. Let me know if you read this and if you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, that's fine. I know people that enjoyed it. And if you didn't like it, let me know why. All right, that's that.